Human beings have been growing their own food for tens of thousands of years. What started off as collecting and planting wild edible weeds has transformed into the cultivated food growing we know today. Just over the past century, many of our grandparents or great-grandparents grew their own food, and the practice was commonplace. During the Great Depression, there were relief gardens, which were planted to help feed those hit hardest by the economic downturn. During both World War I and World War II, there were victory gardens, which were so successful that by 1942, an estimated 20 million gardens had been planted, supplying nearly half of all the fresh produce eaten in the country that year. In more recent times, we've seen the rise of urban gardening, turning rooftops and empty lots into edible gardens for members of the community. And in 2020, we saw seed stores sell out all across the country, fueled by the global pandemic. We as a human race have gotten as far as we have today by knowing how to sustainably grow nutritious food. So how is it that so many of us have forgotten? My name is Ellie, and I'm the head gardener at Home Gardeneers, a business my partner Michael and I created that builds edible gardens and food forests right here in Central Florida. I wasn't always a gardener though. And in fact, originally, I was a hairstylist. My education comprised purely of chemicals, dyes, and hairsprays, and that's as pretty far as you can get from organic gardening. Everything I learned started in my own backyard, and besides a few books and internet articles, my only teacher was Mother Nature. And this is why I need to say this and get it out of the way. No, you do not have a brown thumb. If I can do it with a background in the natural, lacking as much as it was, so can you. Our culture has gotten scarily comfortable with just saying, oh, I can't garden, I kill everything I touch, or I just don't have a green thumb, as a way to dismiss producing our own food. Food growing is a learned skill, just like driving or cooking. The first time you drove, you probably weren't the best driver, and the first time you cooked, it probably wasn't gourmet. We never write those things off saying, oh, it's okay, driving just really isn't for me, I guess, or I'll just have my mom cook for me the rest of my life. We keep trying and we get better until we're just able to do it. Gardening is no different and surprisingly easy once you know just a few requirements of each plant. Yes, there will be problems, and yes, there will be frustrations, but it's worth it, 100%. The reason I went from hairstylist to homesteader was less out of picking up a new hobby and more as a means for survival. At the time, my family didn't have much money on hand, so it just made more sense to make the investment in growing our own food than spending hundreds of dollars a month buying it. Think of the give a man a fish he eats for a day, teach him a fish he eats for a lifetime analogy. Despite my lack of knowledge in gardening, some things grew quite well without even trying. The inspiration that came from seeing how nature persevered helped me do the same after accidentally killing the rest of my plants. Little by little, I learned with each mistake, and soon, gardening became my passion. I started saving seeds from my plants to grow new ones. I learned that you could cut up a branch and stick it in soil, and it could grow roots and become its own plant. I grew so much food, I had to give it away, just not to waste it. My partner, Michael, built an entire greenhouse out of scrap wood and old windows we found on Craigslist. And we built so many gardens that our yard was completely full. One day on a whim, I offered free gardening advice over Facebook to anyone who was ever interested in learning how to grow. The response was so enormous that the next day, I found myself driving all over the city, going yard to yard, teaching people how to grow their own food. It was upon this revelation of interest that Michael said, why don't we build gardens for people for a living? And that's what we've been doing ever since. Gardening means the world to me. Let's talk about why you should garden, why everyone should garden. The first benefit is having fresh produce available right in your own backyard. You know how it was grown, where it came from, and didn't have to travel miles to get to your path through anyone else's hands. Some may argue that all the work isn't worth it and that the grocery store is good enough. But I'll give you a different perspective. Having fresh picked food is something you can't get at a grocery store, and it's a bigger deal than you may think. Did you know that there has been a steady decrease since the 1950s in the general nutritional content of almost every common garden vegetable grown here in America? Conventional farming practices used to grow your food focus on producing high and consistent yields. not the nutritious food our ancestors ate. Fresh produce can also rapidly lose nutrients. Green beans and spinach, for example, can lose more than 75% of their vitamin C in as little as a week, even under normal refrigeration temperatures. Consider how long it might have taken from the moment the food was picked to the time it took to process it, ship it, and sit on a grocery store shelf, only to be bought by you who kept it in the fridge for God knows how long before you finally decided to make dinner out of it. Compare that to having a backyard garden where the food is picked right before it's eaten. In our house, an empty fridge isn't a bad thing. It just means all the food is growing outside. You may have also heard, at one time or another, people say the food you grow yourself tastes better. And it does. Did you know that some food at the grocery store is picked before it's even ripe? Do you know what the ripening process does? It's the final stage of fruiting where the sugars and flavors reach their peak. In order to gain the appearance of being ripe, food producers gas your food with ethylene gas. This only forces the food to change in color on the outside and doesn't naturally ripen it from the inside at all. And this goes for food that's branded as organic, too. I know many people find comfort in seeing the USDA organic label on their food, but in all truth, the organic label does allow practices that wouldn't be happening the same way in nature, and studies have shown that organic food bought at the grocery store is about nutritionally equivalent to conventionally grown foods. Large-scale food producers are in charge of feeding the entire population, and I honestly don't know how they could do it completely in sync with nature. But you in your backyard can. Yes, gardening is dirty, and it can be hard work. It doesn't have to be hard work often. That's why I started my first raised bed. A raised bed is a large, often wooden container filled with high-quality soil free of weeds. This gives your seeds a healthy environment to start in. When you irrigate it, the majority of your work is trimmed away. You will have weed seeds blown to your bed from the wind, or the occasional bird that'll leave a seedy present in your soil. But compare that to the estimated hundreds of millions of weed seeds in any given acre of land, and your work seems a lot easier. Even in the hottest months of the year, when the weeds run rampant, we simply tarp our garden beds with clear plastic sheeting, and the sun will solarize the bed. This not only kills the weeds that are already growing in the bed, but also cooks the remaining weed seeds until they are no longer viable and kills pests, their eggs, and larvae. That way, when the hot season's over, you just take the tarp off the bed and have a pretty fresh slate to start in. Give it some fertilizer, plant some seeds, and you're growing again. Eating the food you grow yourself is good for you as it is, but so is all the effort you put into making your garden big and beautiful. According to the CDC, light gardening work can help reduce the chances of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, heart attack, stroke, and several forms of cancer. If you're gardening on a nice sunny day for just 15 minutes, your body will absorb enough vitamin D, which research suggests can help decrease blood pressure, increase bone strength, reduce the symptoms of autism, and help prevent colds and flus. And don't forget about the dirt. Research has discovered a common bacteria found in soil that was able to elevate the quality of life in cancer patients. And in mice, it affected them as if they were on antidepressants. The point is, we weren't made to sit inside all day under artificial lights staring at a screen. We forget we are animals. We are meant to be outside. We are meant to be eating fresh like the rest of the wildlife on our planet. We have seen ourselves as so separate for so long that we don't even realize how artificial, prepackaged, and processed our life has become. Whether you recognize it or not, it is affecting you. It's affecting your children. It's affecting our species. It's affecting our planet. Having a backyard garden is such a small thing you can do that has such an immense impact on our lives, both as individuals and as a whole. I fully believe that we could build our community into a food-growing hub, one where we grow more than enough to share, and we learn so much that we'll be able to help others just starting out not be afraid to grow. Our country used to do it, and we can do it again. Here in our growing region of Central Florida, we can grow food approximately 331 days out of the 365-day year, making it one of the longest growing seasons in all of America. We have every reason to grow, and it just starts with one small garden bed in your backyard. Gardening is our past, and it absolutely must be our future. Thank you.